And that's what our bill does by adding an electronic currency, similar to how our physical dollars we deposit into the bank becomes electronic. And then we use our debit card or we use Venmo or we use Cash App to send physical dollars. They're not really physical, but let's just call them physical for the sake of the discussion, to somebody else. All we're trying to say with this bill, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are afraid of digital currencies because of what's happening in China, what's happening with CBDCs, where they can control us and limit our freedoms. But asset-backed digital currencies or blockchain technology is not a CBDC.
Silver and gold investors, we have a new friend, a person who's forwarding legal tender legislation, not just possibly in your state, but on a nationwide basis, state by state as well. How does the prospect of legal tender legislation sound to you? How does the prospect of a state depository, possibly in your state, to store silver and gold? And what about solutions, digital solutions, modern banking type solutions that might allow you to use silver and gold as real money in day-to-day transactions? Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Mr. Daniel Diaz. He's with the Citizens for Sound Money. He's the executive director. Daniel, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Hey, Ron, thank you for having me on.
Well, it's our pleasure. There's a wave of legislation sweeping the country on a state-by-state basis. Our viewer who's with us now, they're silver and gold enthusiasts. What does this mean for the silver and gold community? Why is it so important that this type legislation get recognized and passed?
Yeah, I mean, let me start with how I got into the sound money movement and when I realized that there was a problem with the current economy and currency. I, believe it or not, I didn't come into the sound money movement until around February, March of this year. Prior to the physical gold and silver, I was part of the Bitcoin sound money movement. I'm originally, and I still am, a crypto miner and blockchain consultant. I saw the problems with economic freedom, political freedom, and personal liberty because of the government's control over the monetary system. And I thought Bitcoin was the only solution at the time. So I left my 22-year political career as a consultant. I've run campaigns, super PACs, raised money for 22 years. I started at the age of 16 in political advocacy. I've also been in the private sector as a stock broker. So as a registered rep, I learned about how the economic system worked. Prior to being a registered rep, I was an insurance agent, so I understood how the insurance side of things work. So I had this full economic understanding of the fiat system. And then I learned about Bitcoin, which brought everything together. But I didn't really understand the problem with the Fed until I decided to launch my own gold-backed NFT project. And the whole idea was to educate our NFT holders on sound money principles, financial literacy to increase their financial IQ. So I looked around for some sound money education partners, and that's where I found Citizens for Sound Money, because on our website, citizensforsoundmoney.org, you'll find what is sound money and educational resources. And they interviewed me, Jim, the chairman, interviewed me for their YouTube channel, our YouTube channel. And that he kind of pointed me to the Mike Maloney series. And Mike Maloney was like a sound money a memory dump, kind of like the Matrix. When you watch The Hidden Secrets of Money, I mean, you take in a bunch of information, and that's what got me down the rabbit hole. And then I realized, holy cow, this is a lot worse than I thought. I thought, Bitcoin, I thought we had time. I didn't realize what economic peril not just our country is in, but globally. So Citizens for Sound Money, we were founded in March of 2021 with the idea of promoting sound money and the use of sound money, and also using government advocacy and political advocacy. For the first 2 years, we were more building our community, building our Reddit group, bringing in advisory board members, and building basically a war chest for when we decided to get into political advocacy. And that happened this year when I was just inquiring about being education partners with Citizens for Sound Money. We learned about the Texas bill. They were trying to pass the transactional gold and silver bill. And I'm like, hey, I've been in politics for 23 years. let me help lobby in Texas. I have connections in Austin, and that led to me helping out with their actual legislative agenda, which it's kind of been dormant until this year. And then they brought me on as legislative director. 5 months later, they hired me as executive director. So we are currently targeting 6 specific states: New Hampshire, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, Utah, and South Dakota. We're active in 4 of them. We're active in New Hampshire, South Dakota, South Carolina. Sorry, not South Dakota, South Carolina. New Hampshire, Florida, South Carolina, and Texas. We actually partnered with another organization founded by Kevin Friedman. I don't know if you can see this book called Pirate Money. Kevin Friedman. They have the Economic War Room. They're working with 15 other states. So with our states overlapping with their states, it's a total of 18 states right now that we're talking with legislators about legal tender bills and sound money legislation. Our bill is called the Sound Money Act because it does multiple things. But before I continue, do you have anything you want to ask?
Yes. I want to have a couple of observations. First, I sense that you are a person, that you're a political force to be reckoned with. You're very passionate, and not just the fact that you have the passion, but you also have the experience with lobbying and working to get legislation passed. And I think it's a very unique combination also, that you came up through the crypto world and now have also embraced the silver and gold as sound money concept, that you're a real unique combination of both a political force. Is it okay that I call you that? A political force?
Absolutely.
Along with a sound money force. And when those two converge, that for the people that are joining us today that are silver and gold enthusiasts, right? Like you are our best friend. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, what I have found out, part of the reason why I came with Citizens for Sound Money, Citizens for Sound Money has a whole section about asset-backed digital currencies, which are cryptocurrencies that are backed 1-to-1 with gold and silver, whether it's all fractional, except for some. Some are actually like one PAX G, which is the second largest ABDC out there. It's redeemable for 400 ounces of gold. One PAX G is 1 ounce of gold. And then you have like KAU, which is Kinesis gold-backed currency. That's 1 gram of gold. KAG, which is 1 ounce of gold. Then you have a few other companies like Load, which has no, not KAU, AGX and AUX. AUX is their gold token, which is 1 milligram of gold, and AGX, which is 1 gram of silver. So these are all asset-backed digital currencies, and I love the fact that we coined the term asset-backed ABDC because it's ABDCs versus CBDCs. You have monopoly money and digital monopoly money versus sound digital money.
I love that. I love acronyms. All my viewers know that, but ABDC, it starts with the A, asset-backed digital currencies. The key on that is the AB, the asset-backed, right?
Correct.
That there's actually an asset that's there, that's audited, regulated. Transparency is a big key. And that's, I think, the future for silver and gold, right? It's backed. It's actually backed, and it's verifiable. It's regulated. It's auditable. It's transparent. However you want to say it, it's there. And let me ask you this question before we circle back to this legislation, but it's redeemable typically as well. Is it? I mean, does it depend on the product?
100%. So yes, all the ones that I mentioned are redeemable. So,
okay.
But there's a differentiation. We really consider asset-backed digital currencies are redeemable, but at lower thresholds. Because if you want to redeem, say, Tether Gold or PAX G, even though they're ABDCs, they're not redeemable for the common person. You have to redeem at least 400 ounces of gold, which is like $800,000. So yes, though they're ABDCs, they're not lower threshold. But for example, Kinesis and Load and even Glint, which is not an asset-backed digital currency, but they use a database system to transfer ownership of gold and silver. Those three companies, you can actually redeem much lower amounts. For instance, with Kinesis, you can redeem 100-gram bar gold or 20 ounces of silver. With Load, you can redeem, and this is the lowest threshold, you can redeem a minimum of 1 ounce of gold, and also it's 20 ounces of silver. And then Glint is a much more personal kind of a la carte. The smaller the bar, the round or the coin, the more the premium you have to pay to redeem it. So all these coins, digital assets, are redeemable for physical gold and silver. And same with, it's in our legislation, the Sound Money Act. We're calling it the Sound Money Act, not just the Legal Tender Act, the Sound Money Act, where the electronic gold and silver currencies have to be redeemable.
Now, as we talked before we came online, there were three key components to this legislation. Three plus a bonus. I'll say, there's always a little bonus thrown in there. Number one, you're talking about legal tender legislation, which in some ways is mostly a symbolic type thing. Secondly, you're talking about state depositories, where states can on their own set up their own depository where silver and gold can be stored. And then thirdly, the third component is the asset-backed digital currency component, which we just discussed. Right. The bonus would be that if this legislation gets passed, that if the state does still, for some reason, have a state sales tax, that would essentially be eliminated as well. Is that true?
Correct. And it also protects residents. So let me quickly go through our 3 points and what this legislation does. You were correct. It creates legal tender for gold and silver. And we define legal tender as specie legal tender, which typically means it's a coin that's recognizable based on the looks, and usually is U.S. minted coins. Right. I think the Missouri bill, the old version, said that the specie would only be U.S. minted coins. But we gave the treasurer or the CFO or the equivalent of the treasurer of the state the authority to accept other forms of specie or bullion. We expanded the definition of specie legal tender. And for those who don't know, specie is exactly that. It's a minted coin that or even a foil or a gold metal foil that is recognizable as legal tender, or you can just tell by looking at it that there's a certain weight and purity. Expanding that definition to bullion, where the CFO or the treasurer of the state can then declare it, this is now considered legal tender. That is important because we don't want just specific coins. We want gold and silver, period, to be considered legal tender specie.
If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell them that you're from Ron's Basement.
So as I understand it, even like a 1 ounce silver bar, as long as it is stamped on there that it's 1 ounce, and as long as it is stamped on there that it's 0.999 pure silver, that under certain definitions of the law, that would be considered, or under specie law, that would be considered legal tender, as long as that's outlined in the legislation.
Right. Well, our legislation allows the CFO to declare bullion as specie and legal tender. And with our bill, the third part, or even the depository, we allow the CFO or the treasurer, and I keep saying CFO because in Florida it's a CFO, not a treasurer, or in Texas it's a comptroller. So I'm going to use both interchangeably. We allow the CFO to hire a third-party administrator to manage the operations of the depository and also the operations of electronic currency, because, as I think a lot of your viewers know and we know, the government is horrible at being efficient. So
Yeah.
we wrote the bill so that it would be a public-private partnership where the state isn't an expert in gold. It's not an expert in silver. It's not an expert in depository vaults or an electronic currency. So we give the CFO or the treasurer the authority to contract out third-party solutions and bring that into the state. So, for example, Texas is the only state in the union that has a state depository. And they paid a pretty penny. I think the fiscal note was like $25 million, give or take, to build it. And it's pretty much empty because because nobody uses gold and silver, right? So as you mentioned earlier, gold and silver legal tender laws are more symbolic. There's 4 states in the union right now. I watched one of your previous videos. There was only 3. Arkansas was the newest state to have legal tender, but Utah was first, then Wyoming, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. The only 4 states that have legal tender, but it's mostly symbolic. Utah has the UPMA, and Texas has their own depository, but they're not full. They're not full to capacity because who uses gold and silver as money? And that's what our bill does by adding an electronic currency, similar to how our physical dollars we deposit into the bank becomes electronic, and then we use our debit card or we use Venmo or we use Cash App to send physical dollars. They're not really physical, but let's just call them physical for the sake of the discussion, to somebody else. All we're trying to say with this bill, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are afraid of digital currencies because of what's happening in China, what's happening with CBDCs, where they can control us and limit our freedoms. But asset-backed digital currencies or blockchain technology is not a CBDC. Just like you can use anything for good and bad, right? Somebody who has a concealed weapons license or is trained to use a weapon legally and within the law, that's a good person that's using the gun properly. Then you have bad actors who use it for crimes and violence. Same thing with any type of technology. Blockchain technology, there's good and bad. And when you have a central entity controlling those digital currencies, then that is where you have problems. Asset-backed digital currencies, or in this case, Bitcoin, it's decentralized. Nobody controls it. Once you receive ownership, or once you receive the custodianship of that token, nobody can take it away from you because it's decentralized. Once you have it in your account, it's yours. And that's how it's also written in the law. In our law, we specifically have a bailment relationship. Bailment means that the state of Florida or the state of Missouri or whichever state accepts our bill is a bailee, where they're only holding it like a warehouse. But we're the owners of that physical gold and silver. Those digital coins are just representations of the physical gold and silver being held in a bailment relationship with the state. The state cannot use the gold and silver. It's not in their balance sheet. They can't. The legislature we prohibit the legislature from using it in appropriations. And we also have the Texas anti-confiscation language in the bill, which prevents the federal or the state government from confiscating any of that gold and silver because it's not theirs. So asset-backed digital currencies, don't be afraid of that. Be afraid of who's controlling it. And when you have a private company who is self-interested in making a profit, that's why I love public-private partnerships between the government and the private entity, because those private entities don't want to be thrown in jail, right? If they're good actors, right? You have people who break the law in corporations and everything. But most of these people in Clint, Load, Kinesis, other gold and silver companies, they're like-minded. They're like us. They started these companies because they saw a problem, and the only way to bring us back to a gold and silver standard is by making gold and silver functional. The IRS defines functional currency. Functional currency is essentially the currency you use. It's a typical term used for business and accounting, where if you have a company overseas and say in Europe and using euros, then the IRS defines functional currency as that's the functional currency you're using for your business. You're just going to convert it to dollars. By making gold and silver digital, now it fits the definition of a functional currency. And with the legal tender protections, because Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution allows states to only make gold and silver coin legal tender specie. or for the or legal tender for the payment of debts. And I know there's a lot of people out there, and especially in my circles, that want the states to make Bitcoin legal tender. Yeah, I'm cool with that, but only the federal government can do that, not the states. The states are barred from making anything legal tender except for gold and silver. And we, through our legislation, expanded that. So let me just quickly go through the 3 points: making legal tender specie, depository, and electronic currency.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, First Mining Gold. They're a Canadian gold developer with 2 world-class projects in Canada. They also have a handful of other projects. When you total up all the gold in their resources, it comes to over 12 million ounces. They're worth checking out. I'll put a link to the company's website in the description below.
I liked what you said about the way you phrased it regarding silver and gold, making them functional, because I think there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that have that mantra that if I don't hold it, I don't own it. Right? A lot of the silver and gold enthusiasts feel that way because there's at that point very little counterparty risk, right? Like, I've got this, I have the value in my hand. However, and I've said this many times, I mean, I think that the future for silver and gold, if we really do truly want a bright future for silver and gold, that we do, as you said, have to make it more functional. It has to function within the modern financial system, monetary system. And if we don't do that, then, sure, I can sit with a pile of silver coins and say, well, if doomsday happens and there's no electricity and there's zombies walking around, I can buy bread with my silver coins. But in any other scenario, as we move into the future, there has to be an electronic solution for silver and gold, and it has to be functional. It has to be what I heard you say as you described the legislation, a system where it's segregated on a state-by-state basis, right? There's no commingling of funds between the depositories, and that could be what could really catapult, the use of real money, silver and gold, as we move into the coming decades. Yeah,
and the segregated. So yes, that is correct. If each state has their own state depository, it will be segregated. However, the way that our law is written, they can even contract, let's say, with the state of Texas to use their bullion depository. Yeah, the states can put their segregate the gold and silver, but I want to state that there are 3 Supreme Court cases that when people lobby for legal tender specie, they don't really look back to the 19th century for Supreme Court cases. But there are 3 Supreme Court cases that really give the authority of the state to make legal tender specie. And when it comes to segregation, there is a Supreme Court case called Bronson v. Rhodes. Let me double check. Yes. It's Bronson v. Rhodes in 1868. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing what happened in law. There was Bronson sued the state for creating, let's say, notes, but it wasn't really the state creating the notes. It was the bank, and he wanted his specific specie back. I think he deposited a certain kind of coin into the depository, and he wanted it to come back out. But the Supreme Court basically ruled it doesn't matter what specie you deposit. What matters with gold and silver is the weight and purity that you receive back. So if you deposit American Eagles, and let's say you deposit, 100 American Eagles, and you want that back, the state, according to the Supreme Court, doesn't have to give back that specific specie. All that matters is that the weight and the purity is returned, because it could cause a lot of problems. Because if you start having millions of Americans depositing into different state depositories, different amounts of bullion specie, it's an impossible task to really keep track of everything. It's possible, but it's really going to rack up the costs for managing the depositories. By the Supreme Court making this ruling in Bronson v. Rhodes, and there's other Supreme Court cases that give the states a lot of authority over legal tender with gold and silver, like Lane County v. Oregon in 1868. And then there's Nibia versus New York, actually in the 20th century in 1934. These 3 Supreme Court cases, And there's another one that's not in here. I don't know why, but I think it's there's a Kansas court case as well. But yes, I just wanted to make that point when I say segregated. Yes, we can have it completely segregated if the states and the state treasurers or CFOs decide that.
Right. But if I'm in Missouri and we get a state depository here, if I put 50 silver Buffalo rounds into the state depository, that doesn't mean that they have a little shelf with my name written on it,
right?
With my 50, right? And I think that's that makes sense to me. That we're not expecting segregation down to your specific little coins, but what we are expecting is that money that would be or silver and gold, real money that would be in the state depository, that it wouldn't be commingled with other state funds, or not. It would not be accessible to the politicians. That it would be segregated to the extent that it belongs to the people that put their ounces into the state depository. Is that accurate?
Correct. That's accurate. Yes.
Okay. Daniel, the organization's name is Citizens for Sound Money. How do they learn more about you and about the organization?
Yeah, you can visit our website. It's citizens4soundmoney.org. Don't put FOR. That's another Citizens for Sound Money. In fact, Larry Hilton, who is the attorney who wrote the first legal tender bill in Utah, he created Citizens for Sound Money back then. We didn't know that. He has the domain. Larry is now part of our legislative committee as one of our legal experts that help us draft legislation. And he's like, it was funny. He was upset at first, like, who are these people with Citizens #4 Sound Money? Then we met Larry, and now he's like, all right, we're great. It's funny. So don't use FOR. We don't own that website. We use the #4. So Citizens.
I want to interject because you bring up a good point. It feels like when any of us silver and gold enthusiasts get together, we wind up becoming friends. Allies.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Well, because we thought we were alone. Right, I was talking to Patrick Holland. We spoke after you and I spoke. You're like, hey, you need to talk to Patrick Holland. I'm like, absolutely, give me his number. And we talked, and man, we already experienced that with our Texas partners, but he experienced what we experienced with Texas partners. Like, we're not alone. There are other people, other organizations, and like, we do this full time. Patrick, I love Patrick. He dedicated 1 year of his entire life to getting the Missouri bill, and it took a big toll on him. He wasn't working. That's all he did. And, after talking to us, and I know he mentioned in the last video, I think it came out this weekend, that, we might partner together. And I'm looking forward to having that discussion and officially partnering with I think it's Freedom Missouri. I forget what's the name of his organization.
It's the Missouri Freedom Initiative, mofree.org.
Yes.
And what you said and what your impressions were of Pat Holland are true, and everything you said is true. He has dedicated himself and sacrificed to no benefit of his own to further the legal tender legislation in the state of Missouri. And I think it's awesome that you and he got together. Most likely, our viewer right now who's joining you and I, they know who Pat Holland is, and he is a great guy. And it's cool. I mean, really it is, because like I said, you and I, somebody's watching us right now, we're all in the same boat, right? And we are really, especially here in the United States, maybe like 1 in 100, 1 in 150 people, right, that know what's going on and have kind of woken up. It'll be interesting as we head into the next decade. We could see the doubling, tripling, quadrupling, or even more of the number of people that are with us. But for right now, I like to joke around and say we're like the Navy SEALs. We're like a small elite little group of highly trained individuals.
Yeah, and to just get go off of that, like, people know that people who are not part of the Sound Money movement, or I call it the Sound Money Gospel, like spreading the Sound Money Gospel, people know there's a problem. They see that their dollar isn't able to purchase the same amount that they were able to 3 years ago prior to the COVID. And here's a shocking statistic for those of you that were watching. since COVID, the average inflation of the dollar has increased to close to 50%. They actually had, I was at my Kaffa Kava, I go every morning to a Kaffa Kava bar and watch the news and talk with everybody. And they had a segment this morning on Fox News about the inflation of different things, like gas is up 78%, food's up like 40%. When you average all the different inflation rates out, it's almost 50%. And that's because they were printing. And people who don't know why inflation is going up or what inflation is, and inflation is simply the expansion of the currency supply. That's it. That's a simple definition of inflation, the expansion of the currency supply. They don't know why they're having a problem, why they're becoming poorer, because they can't buy, the purchasing power is lost. But we, the elite, we have to get out there and educate. Yeah. You know, and these type of formats are extremely important, educating the masses. And we have to, right? We have a responsibility to our fellow man to help them, especially when it comes to economic freedom. Because if we have economic freedom, we'll have political freedom and personal liberty. Because gold and silver is freedom. Gold and silver is liberty. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, and I read a quote last night from Thomas Jefferson, right, and where he said, like, the biggest threat to the United States are big banks and central banking, more of a threat than an invading army, basically. Yes. I mean, that was Thomas Jefferson, right? So it's okay for you and I to say that. That was, you know, we were, you know, he's like, I guess he's not officially a founding father, but it's Thomas Jefferson, you know, yeah. I mean, come on. So we're good. Hey, Daniel, this has been great. Can we look forward to you joining us again sometime in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we end, I want to finish with a couple other websites that your viewers can go to. Yep. All right. So if you go to Citizens Sound Money, we have a donation page. Now, it's not cheap lobbying. Not only am I out there lobbying, we find lobbyists who are in line with our mindset. For instance, I'm going to throw a shout out there. The executive director of the Christian Family Coalition has been lobbying in the Tallahassee legislature for over 20 years. Over the last, I think, 5 or 6 years, he has had a 100% success rate in getting all his bills that his organization has pushed through. And he has his own private company, not with the Christian organization. And lobbying isn't cheap. If you Google lobbyists, like just Google online, what does a lobbyist usually charge at a state level? It's like $15,000 to $20,000 a month for a lobbyist. Our costs are a lot lower because I'm executive director, and Tony and I go way back. He's the one that got me in politics in 2016. We're burning through around $20,000 a month for Florida, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and it looks like now we're going to be coming and helping out Missouri and Texas. Texas just had a special legislative session. We're waiting to see what happens there before they might deploy me out there. But our number one focus right now is Florida, because Florida is the third largest state, I think, in population and in the economy, behind California and Texas. And it's not cheap to get sound money. And it's so important right now that this message and this legislation gets out there, because it gives people the option to opt out of the Federal Reserve system and get into sound money system. And the great thing about the digital, which I didn't mention on this call or this interview, is that the gold and silver you can spend with a debit card. So it'll be just like cash. So if you love what we're doing, if you want to see the Sound Money Act or any version of legal tender to get out there, please visit our website, citizens4soundmoney.org. Click on donations and please give. The other website we launched an online. If you're in Florida, and we're going to be doing this with our other states, but I focus on Florida. We have a website on alignact.com, and we'll post the link down on below. If you go to alignact.com, you can search for our campaign. It's called Take Action Now to support the Florida Sound Money Act. We'll create one for New Hampshire, South Carolina, and so forth. But you go on our website, put in your address, and it brings up your legislators. All you have to do, we already have a script, we have an email, we have a pledge, we even have a phone number script, but we're not going to put the phone numbers of everybody until we know what committee the bill goes into. Just click a button and it emails your legislators. That is the number one. I heard Patrick Holland mention this, and I don't know if you guys know about JP Cortez at the Sound Money Defense League. He spoke at the Silver Symposium, and it is absolutely crucial that Grassroots gets involved. Legislators, lobbyists, we can only push so hard if there isn't a grassroots movement. If you are listening to this right now, pause this video, click on the link below to the Sound Money Act if you're in Florida, and let your legislators know you want the Sound Money Act. There's only so much we as an organization can do, or as a lobbyist we can do to push sound money legislation. If they don't hear from their constituents, and specifically their constituents, because they don't care if you're around the country and you're emailing them. That's flat out. I'm telling you right now, as a 23-year veteran in political advocacy, if you as a constituent don't reach out to your legislators, they don't care. So if you're in Texas, if you want, that's great. But let me tell you, that's not going to matter. They want to hear from the constituents. So pause this, go on the website and email your state rep, your state senator, and Governor DeSantis today and let them know. And do that if you're in Missouri, call your legislator. If you're in Texas, I know that Texas is pushing it. New Hampshire, we have Representative Keith Amon. He's the sponsor of the Sound Money Act up there. And the House side in Florida, it's Representative Bankson and Senator Rodriguez. If you have Senator Rodriguez in Miami, your Representative Bankson, I think in like the Orlando, Apopka area, give them a call and thank them for sponsoring the Sound Money Act. Call Keith Amon. New Hampshire is a great, small state. Call his phone. I think his phone number is on the website. I'm sorry, Keith, if you're watching this, you're going to get a lot of phone calls. Call Representative Keith Amon in New Hampshire and thank him for sponsoring the Sound Money Act. And I forget the representative in Texas. Call him as well. So that's basically it. That's all I wanted to say. It's so important that you, the viewer, call and let people know, the legislators know, that you want the Sound Money Act passed.
Yep, and I will put all the links, the 3 links that you mentioned, at the very top of the description section of this video. Daniel, thank you for being here on behalf of our viewers, on behalf of all of our basement dwellers, gold and silver enthusiasts. We know, like I said at the onset, that you are a force to be reckoned with, both politically and from a sound money, gold and silver perspective. So we thank you for your time today and also for all your efforts. And you can count on us to continue to give you our full support.
Thank you so much, Ron. And thank you for all the viewers who are watching this and are taking action right now. And I'm looking forward to giving you updates and going across the country and bringing the Sound Money Act to other states.
We'll be with you every step of the way.
Awesome. Thank you so much.